All right, well, welcome back to Exhaust Sports Auto. My name is Kevin, and we are here to check out this 2020 Toyota Camry TRD. So it's the tough one. Here's the thing, I've been driving this car around, and I've actually already driven the four-cylinder XSE with the 19-inch wheels as well. It was a 2018 with about 43,000 miles on it. That was courtesy of Johnson Lexus. And I wanted to do that because, well, there's a few things that I noticed with this V6 that kind of troubled me a little bit, and I'll get to that in a bit. But as a whole though, oh yeah, Toyota definitely listened to you. They made this thing because, well, they listened to the YouTube comment sections. That's why this car exists. This car was not made for normal people because normal people can just go and buy a normal Camry and be super happy with it. However, you asked for a rough riding vehicle with a V6 with a catback exhaust that rattles and does all this extra stuff. And you know what? Toyota delivered. So now that Toyota delivered and did their part, now it's time for you to open up the checking account and write them a check and go buy your own. Because if you don't, you're a hypocrite, because you're always like, oh, where's the sports sedan? Where's this? Where's that? Well, here it is. So there you go. But in all seriousness, of course, I mean, this is the TRD. This is the sportiest variant. And honestly, though, this is the cheapest way to buy into the V6 engine in the Toyota Camry lineup, actually. This is cheaper by at least $3 to $4 grand compared to an XSE or an XLE with the V6, although that's what I would recommend you doing if you wanted this motor. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, I mean, look at this thing. First of all, let's start out with the exterior. I mean, it's got a Catley, whatever the company is. They're the one who developed all the splitters for this car, that big old spoiler, the side skirts, diffusers, all that stuff. So that's why this vehicle looks like this. It's not too far off from the XSE aside from those little bits there, but it looks wild. I mean, if you put Ferrari badges all over this thing, I mean like real Ferrari badges, this would pass. Put the little yellow Scuderia badges on the side and the, Super Trofeo or something like that in the rear end. This would totally pass. And Top Gear and all the, European journalists with their European voices, they'd be like going nuts for this thing. But because it's a Camry, people are like, oh, maybe it's a little too much. You let me know down in the comment section if it's too much or if you would buy this thing or what have you, because the Camry as a whole, after 2018, it looks nuts. It looks wild, and I love it. It's different. It looks like nothing else out on the road. It's amazing, man. And because people aren't really buying sedans all that much, the craze is for the SUVs, they had fun with it, and I appreciate it. I'm glad that this vehicle exists. Although this is not my first choice or preference, I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad that you have the option of getting it, and the fact that this is the cheapest way to get a V6. Now, this car, because it has a V6, let's get on to the driving aspects now. It kind of torque steers a little bit more. The four-cylinder I drove, it did not torque steer at all because it's only got 206 horsepower. And by the way, if you're looking at a four-cylinder, if it's got 4 exhaust tips on it, like 4 quad tips or whatever, it'll have an extra 3 horsepower. So instead of producing 203 horsepower, it'll have 206 horsepower. And these figures are all up compared to the previous generation Camry, and both for the V6 and for the four-cylinder variants. So there's that. And no, this is not just like an appearance package or something like that. I mean, I kind of wish it was, but I guess that's what the XSE is supposed to be, right? This thing, it's legit. It's got all types of changes done to it. It's got new springs on it. And obviously, for 2018 and up, this is on its own little new TNGA global architecture for Toyotas. And it now utilizes a strut-based suspension up front, of course, like always. But it now also has double wishbone kind of multi-link setup in the rear end. So that's, even in the regular Camrys, okay, that's not a TRD, that's the case, and that's going to not only help with the body control, but also with the ride quality, especially in the rear, so that's awesome. It's got new TRD springs, of course, and the engine remains the same, but it does have a new catback exhaust in the rear. It does sound pretty good from the outside, I'm not gonna lie. There was actually a kid, my dad was actually driving this car, and he was actually telling me some kid came up to him and he asked him to rev up the engine, but my dad didn't know what that meant, so I kind of disappointed that little kid. But anyway, that's the point. It does sound pretty good from the outside. It does captivate, and going back to the looks a little bit, people are staring at this thing. People who know nothing about cars think that this is some amazing, unbelievable machine. I mean, this thing looks like it's packing 3,000 horsepower, although it's not. It's producing 301 horsepower and 267 pounds-feet of torque. And another change that they made, now this is optional, but this vehicle does have it. This thing has got 19-inch wheels, of course, and these 19-inch wheels are actually 3.1 pounds lighter than the XSE 19-inch wheels. So there you go. There's a little tidbit right there. That, of course, reduces the unsprung mass and, helps with the cornering ability and all that good stuff. But it's got 235 wide tires. The XSE also has 235 wide tires. But these are summer tires, and they also produce a lot more noise than your traditional all-season tire does. And this is definitely the case because I drove the XSE I had Michelin Primacy touring tires. Way quieter, dude. Far more refined. Loved that. But this vehicle has a lot more vibrations going on with it, a lot more creaks and rattles I've noticed. The 43,000 mile car I drove also had a few, but not as much as this. Now this is a press car, and it's got over 14,000 miles on it. So that's really, in real talk, that's really 140,000 miles when you translate that into normal people miles, because the 43K miles, a normal human being drove it for that many miles. This was just trashed for 14K miles. So that might have something to do with it, but I don't think so. I think this is truly calibrated and tuned this way from the factory to be a little bit more bouncy. Having this slightly more bouncy ride, it sits about 0.6 inches lower than a standard XSE Camry would. And that does reduce the, lowers the center of gravity, which that was a thing that they try to improve for the regular Camrys as well, lowering the center of gravity. But this does it even further because it just naturally sits lower. But because of that, this thing you feel all the bounces in this thing. I guess you feel a little bit more connected to it, but I don't need to be that connected to a Camry, if you know what I mean. And, I had my parents in here. They were like, this is unacceptable, really, the way that this rides, the way this feels, the vibrations from this exhaust. They did not like it. And my parents are pretty much the core demographic buyer of an automobile, a new car. And their preference would be like a new SUV that's a lot quieter than this. And all these 2018s and up, they all got this 8-speed automatic. It does a fine job kicking that. However, I will say in half throttle maneuvers, it kind of gets confused. I'll downshift and I'll hold it there. It does a weird thing there, but for the most part, this is pretty good. Just did a little overtaking maneuver right there. The power, I can feel it kind of bottoming out though after a while, and that's crazy to me. This is far better than the 4-cylinder, I'll give it that. However, here's the thing with the 4-cylinder. I think for city driving, the 4-cylinder is actually superior because it doesn't torque steer as much. Despite this car having pretty wide tires in the front, being summer tires at that, this thing, it still torque steers. It still lights up the front tires because this is a lot of power to 301 horsepower. And the 206 horsepower, it put down the power a lot better. However, it really, if you're doing like highway speeds in that thing, like 60 miles an hour and up, and you punch it, you're gonna get nothing out of that thing. It's pretty slow in that regards. But in city driving, it's pretty punchy. I do like that. This car also has great thrust. I mean, I felt a lot more confident punching it in this and overtaking that truck in this than I would in the 4-cylinder, that's for sure. If I was in the 4-cylinder, I would not have done that. Let me tell you that much. Also, here's another weird thing I noticed, and this is indicative of being a press car, I think, but this thing has got upgraded brakes, obviously, for the TRD compared to the regular XSEs, and I don't have as much confidence in the brakes as I did in the XSE I drove with 43,000 miles on it. Something about this, I think the pads really wore out on this or something, because you really have to get deep on the brake pedal for you to get any real stopping power. In the XSE, like, you can just kind of, get on the brakes like a normal person and it's fine. It's got way more braking power than this, I feel like, which is strange because I think the regular car has 12-inch brake rotors. This has 12.7 inches, I believe, I think. Yeah, even though you feel all the bumps, I mean, it's reasonably comfortable. It's not like an unbelievably crap ride quality or anything like that, but this is nowhere near as nice to drive as a regular XSE. So that's another thing. And I will say both these cars, they do have wind noise past 60 miles an hour, that's for sure. That's just something that these Toyota cars apparently cannot escape unless you go to like a Lexus ES350 with double pane glass. But a Camry buyer will never look at an ES350 because that's about 10 G's more. and that's probably, they can't budget for that. Despite all the refinement and stuff, does this thing handle legitimately well? So does it at least make up there? Honestly, yes, it does. This is by far the best handling Camry out there ever. Like, no Camry has ever handled like this before. I can say that without a doubt. It turns in a lot better, but here's the thing. This handles pretty much just as well as like a new Honda Accord does. And a new Honda Accord not only handles like this, if not slightly better, with less understeer, because this thing, it doesn't like understeer, it doesn't really plow too much, but it still does more than a Honda. I mean, Honda does a great job dialing out the understeer. They just make the best handling front-wheel drive cars, that's for sure. But this isn't bad. The thing is, though, the Honda, it not only has the great handling, but it's also got great ride quality as well. So I think Toyota built this car like this for the Toyota freaks. You got to be either two people to buy this particular TRD. You just want the V6 at the cheapest price possible, which, okay, and you're just a Toyota freak and you just love what Toyota's done here. If so, great, go for it, because I'm sure this thing is going to have amazing resale value, that's for sure. These summer tires, the way the suspension is just so bouncy, the rattly exhaust, it's just not for me, man. Honestly, the 4-cylinder was less rattly and less noisy than this car is. See, look at that. It's still kind of peeling out the front tires there. It's got a lot of power when I floor it. The 4-cylinder does not have that issue. Another thing, if you are really considering the TRD, definitely get the all-seasons. Get some form of a touring all-season. I know these summer tires aren't even gripping that well either because it's just a lot of power, but hey, it is what it is. I would rather have that refinement. And the paddles react decently well in this car. I forgot to mention that. They're okay. It's not like hyper fast or anything like that, but they're decent paddles. They're usable. I don't mind it. The 8-speed and the ES350 is definitely tuned far superior to this, though. But then again, you pay for that. That car is 10 G's more than this, but it's really worth like 20 G's more, if I'm going to be honest with you. But if you don't have the money for it, don't worry about it. Just get a regular car, a regular Camry. The one I drove had 19s on it. If you got one with like 18s, it would ride even better. Just get like an XLE or something like that with a V6. Or just get a 4-cylinder. The 4-cylinder is fine. I don't have an issue with it per se. But okay, on to this interior now, because this interior, it got a few little changes, nothing too crazy. It's got like these TRD seats. Because this is only about $31,000 and not like the fully loaded trims or anything like that, you lose some options like heated and cooled seats and stuff like that. But as a whole, it still comes with a few things, like a lot of the safety features come as standard, so that's great. Like you got the lane keep assist and all that good stuff. You don't get blind spot monitoring, but you get forward collision braking assist and a TRD embossed all over the place, like TRD carpets, TRD on the seats, and like these striped seats as well with a little bit of red inserts, and a TRD on the gear lever knob as well, so there is that. Steering wheel, it's kind of got like this red stitching all around it. I do like the steering wheel. It's always a nice thing to grip onto. These paddles are pretty much straight out of the Lexus cars for the most part, or they feel very similar to it anyway. You got buttons on the steering wheel, very traditional Toyota stuff, but it's still a pretty plasticky interior, of course. That's probably why it rattles a little bit, especially with mileage. They get the screen as standard. I believe you do get actually like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto this time for 2020. It's the same kind of infotainment layout. I mean, you use it the same way and it's fine, I guess. I still like the Hyundai, Kia / Mazda stuff better, but this is okay. It gets the job done. I like how the climate control totally separated from the screen, of course. Toyota does a great job of that. Gauge cluster is very normal, nothing crazy going on there. I will say fuel economy is pretty decent. You know, I've been trashing on this car and I've seen nothing below 20 mpg. I never got that. I've always been around 21, 22 mpg trashing on this V6. So you know this 4-cylinder is going to be even better. You have automatic headlights and automatic high beams as well, so that's pretty cool. Just have some more of that handling here. A little bit of body roll, nothing too crazy. Yeah, I like the power in this thing. If you're foot to the floor, this is more than enough satisfactory power for street driving, that's for sure. Anyway, you have plenty of storage space. I like how there's a spot to put a large phone like my Note 10 Plus, and I can kind of slide my phone away so it's a little less distracting, and you still have more space underneath that, so that's great. Very intelligent design. You have the USBs and all that stuff, 2 big cup holders, your Sport, Eco, normal controls here as well. Automatic one-touch up and down windows. This vehicle does not have double pane glass, unfortunately, but at least it is one touch up and down. That's such a nice convenient feature for all 4 windows. Decent door pocket space as well. Feel that torque steer a little bit there when I step on it. Anyway, no sunroof in this vehicle because it's a sports car, bro, sports sedan. So no sunroof, keeps the rigidity of this vehicle, so that's pretty nice. Seats are reasonably comfortable. They're a little bit more on the more solid, more rigid side. So they're not like the most comfy plush seats like you get in the Lexus, but they're decent, I suppose. They have like this kind of polyester insert in the middle here with like these red stripes going around it, so there is that. The center armrest space is pretty good, but the glove box isn't huge by any means. Rear seats, of course, extremely accommodating. This car is like 193 inches long. It is a mid-size sedan, of course. I can cross my legs back there, no problems at all. You can't like fold down, like there's no center armrest or anything like that. You can't fold down that middle thing. But the rear seats are very, very accommodating, like you would expect in a mid-sized car. I mean, Avalon, obviously, it's about 197 inches long, so even more space still. But the trunk space is amazing. I love the trunk space. You have a spare tire underneath. But yeah, the trunk, I mean, you can put anything you want back there, basically. The trunk on its own is massive. It's like the size of a full-size car. It's so big, so there's that. But yeah, it's not, as a whole, it's not an unbelievable interior space or anything like that. It's a lot more plastics, a lot more... It's got a few shapes, little geometries, little Pythagorean theorems and stuff like that going on. A little PEMDAS, you know, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally going on in here, so it's not bad, I guess. Took you guys back to Algebra 2 if you weren't paying attention. But anyway, that about concludes my Camry TRD review. I mean, you know, I'm glad it exists, but this is definitely not the Camry I'm going to be buying, that's for sure. Get a regular one, get an XLE, that's really my choice, honestly. But this is cool, I guess. I mean, it looks cool. It's going to have good resale value. It's the cheapest way to get a V6. You'll be all right with the 4-cylinder, especially since, you know, the typical buying demographic that buys these things never exceed the speed limit anyway, so there's that. Yeah, as a daily driver, I can't stand all the rattly behaviors that this vehicle has going on. I mean, yeah, I can't do that. Regular car, amazing. Super plush, super amazing. Love that. And it looks cool too. It's one of the coolest looking Camrys, even if you just get like an XSE, so there's that. So with all that established, hopefully you found value with this little review. And if you're an owner of this car, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think about this thing. Are you a die-hard TRD fan for it? Or even if you're just a regular Camry owner, please let me know how it's held up for you. And check out the end screen for the next review. So I'll see you there.